Welcome to step 4, homies, which is the second step of the big 3: credit score, debt, and savings. It's debt, the middle child, and much like many middle children out there, it's probably the most misconstrued and misunderstood of the big 3. Let's unravel the mystery.
How to Buy a Home educates, protects, and connects first-time homebuyers to qualified vetted realtors in their area. Whether you're looking for DIY information or step-by-step guidance, How to Buy a Home is the #1 resource for first-time homebuyers.
What is up, my How to Buy a Homies? I'm David Sidoni, continuing with the 10 steps of the #1 trusted first-time homebuyer system in the United States. This is step 4, managing your debt. Notice that this step is not called reducing or eliminating your debt so you can buy a home. The reality of today's economy is that buying a home takes more than the old systems. In fact, I just recently dropped an episode called The American Dream is Dead. Now, don't panic. I don't mean that the dream of buying a home is dead. In the episode, I explained that the old school romantic idea of how you get the dream, that's the dead part. And the misunderstanding of how debt works in buying a home, that's a big part of that. You're likely gonna have to work with your debt. You're gonna have to manage it instead of dreaming that you can eliminate it all before you buy a home and still come out financially ahead. In the beginning, I'm going to go over the basic debt for beginners, and I'm also going to get into the advanced steps that put you way ahead of the competition. I'm going to cover things like, how does debt affect your ability to buy a home? How do you balance the impossible, reducing debt while you're still trying to build up your savings at the same time? We're going to talk about big payoffs of debt. We're going to talk about gross debt versus monthly debt. We're also going to talk about the consolidation that we talked about in the last episode. I'll touch on calculating and comprehending what's really important, your debt-to-income ratio, known as your DTI. And don't worry, we're definitely going to talk about student debt and how it is not the hindrance that most people believe. So to start today, let's just come out and say it. Debt is a thing. It just is. In 2024, the average American without a mortgage carried $23,000 worth of debt. So the question is, can you buy a home with debt? Yes. You absolutely do not need to zero out your balance of your debt to buy a home. That is a big fat lie. And here in 2025 and 2026, when we've seen rents rising at double the usual pace that it has for the last decade, and in some areas triple or quadruple that pace, when you truly examine the math behind the rent replacement calculations, for most of you, buying a home while you're still carrying some debt is just going to mathematically be the better fiscal option for you. In fact, it might be your only option. For 6 years here, I've broken down the housing affordability crisis that's happening in North America and how you can beat it. And one of the main things I've addressed was the recent depressing thought that was getting louder and louder among millennials and Gen Zs, that in a 2025 economy, they think maybe they're just going to have to be renters forever. More and more people have been complaining that things aren't like they used to be and it's impossible for them to ever buy a home. This is totally false. Not that things aren't what they used to be. Not that part. That's true. You're right. The old dreamy way of getting the American dream, that's dead. That's all in episode 394 if you want to hear all about the new rent replacement strategy solutions. The false part, the part that's not true, is that it's impossible and that you can't buy a home because you've got debt. You don't have to be debt-free. You don't even have to be nearly debt-free to buy a home. That's a fact. Change your mindset and realize that for most of you, the math is going to be far more in your favor if you work your credit score, your debt, and your savings all simultaneously, instead of doing it one piece at a time. If you just start focusing on reducing all your debt, getting it all gone first, you're going to miss out on some major benefits because the math shows that the sooner that you buy, no matter how flat the housing market is, like it is right now at the end of 2025 and going into 2026, when you buy a home, you're going to come out on top owning as soon as you can so you can get out of the rent trap forever and start building real wealth. And to show you how you can do it, here's a snippet from an interview I did a while ago with some listeners. They were trying to bridge step 3 and step 4, their credit score and their debt. This is episode 167. It's Christina and Sean. Now, if you're a beginner and you've thought that there's no way that you could ever buy a home, you got to listen to this. Nobody in their family had ever bought a home. They really wanted to be the first, so they did a lot of debt reduction first on their own. And then they got some very misguided and totally outdated advice. They slowed down their home buying process by years. If they'd worked the right plan for today's economy, working their credit scores, their debt, and their savings simultaneously, they could have purchased much, much earlier. So by the time they actually did reach out to me, they had looked around and saw that homes had gone up 25 to 35% in their prices. When they first had the idea, homes were a heck of a lot cheaper. And it was a bummer to discover that with the correct guidance about handling their debt, they could have pulled this off way earlier. Yeah, this kind of sucked for them. But this wasn't a mistake that they couldn't come back from. There is a happy ending to their story. They did buy a home, and they doubled the square footage from their apartment, and it only cost them $400 more in their monthly payment. And the kicker was they only needed $18,000 total in their down payment and their closing costs. So let's listen in. You can learn how they did a great job attacking their debt, but they ignored their credit and they lost out. Let's listen in. I know that you guys reached out to me in July.
Yes.
Okay, you reached out to me in July 2022. Tell everybody when you closed on a home.
September 29th, 2022.
So you reached out to me on July 7th. On July 6th, you, as you said, didn't make the call yet, didn't know for sure, and August, September, like seriously, guys, that's 10 weeks.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so tell us, what was your story? You guys obviously have like good jobs and were prepared, had a lot of money and perfect credit, right?
Far from it. No.
Okay.
All right, you want to start from the beginning, like of when I started thinking about buying a house?
Yeah, okay. Give me the details.
All right, so our credit was in the toilet in the beginning of 2022, and actually, the story kind of starts in late 2019. I picked up a book called Bad with Money from Gabby Dunn, which I heard your episode with her the other day.
No way!
Yes. That was the first financial book I picked up because it didn't look like it was crunching numbers. It looked fun. It looked relatable. So I read that and I was like, okay, I'm really bad with money. My husband's bad with money.
Yep.
Let's just Google some other financial stuff. That led me to Dave Ramsey, which I've heard you talk about. So I would say beginning right before the pandemic, we started the budgeting, Dave Ramsey principles, getting out of debt, and we had no consumer debt. We had no car loans. We had no credit cards. It was a bunch of medical debt. And using his principles, we ended up starting in March of 2022. We saved up a bunch of money and we paid off all our debt, but then realized when we looked at our credit was still in the toilet. And so all the delinquencies came off, but we had no lines of credit. So then our goal was always to buy a house, and we were renting at the time. And the rent was pretty steep for a little house. Mm-hmm. And so I got on the internet and I just Googled how to buy a home. And thank God your podcast is How to Buy a Home podcast, because I love podcasts. So I started listening to you, and, some episodes were about the market and I didn't feel like I was there yet. But then I just started scrolling because you had so many episodes.
Mm-hmm. Yay.
Yeah, I saw credit and I realized your podcast, you didn't have to watch it in order or listen to it in order. So then I just happened to pick one about credit, and you had a lady on there. I don't remember her name, but you had a lady talking about credit.
Jeannie, the credit genie. Jeannie, the credit genie.
Yes. And I realized we had such bad credit just because we didn't establish any credit. And the credit we did establish when we were 18, we didn't know how to use. So you guys talked a little bit about secured credit cards to start off with. So we went out and we did talk to his brother-in-law, which is phenomenal. His credit score is amazing. And he did agree with everybody, you need to do this. So we got 3 credit cards, secured credit cards, one for me, one for him, and one that we were both on. And this was in March of 22. By June of 22, we both went from 550 credit scores to 700 just by putting $25 on each card a month for gas and paying it off. So about 18 months, we worked Dave Ramsey, saved up enough money. And when we had the total amount in March of 2022, in one day, I called everybody, negotiated, paid everything off.
And then in March of, when did you go up from 500s to 700? Was that?
So in March, we found you. So by April, we applied for the secured cards and got them in April. And we did one payment on each in May and one payment on each in June. And we went from 550s to 700s.
Okay, so that's why I wanted to interrupt you. I have it now. Dave Ramsey, 2019.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes, you saved money. Yes, you reduced your debt. Your credit score stayed in the toilet the whole time. I don't want to rag on Dave. I do want to uplift that you had such possibilities.
Yes. And that
Okay.
was the piece that was missing with Dave Ramsey. When we finally broke even, it was going to be years before we saved the down payment. Like we had enough for a decent down payment, but then with the whole COVID thing, you needed all kinds of gaps and all this like take it or leave it kind of stuff that we knew it would take forever to get 20% of that market. So that led us to you.
And then it was 10 weeks. So, but you hadn't saved, because if you found us in March and then, in a few months, your credit scores were up, and then July, we hooked you up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how much did you have to save in that time? I'm guessing it wasn't 20%.
No. We put down 5%. And then we were lucky enough. I'm in nursing school for my RN degree. So we had saved up before I started because we knew I was going to stop working at my job and Sean would be the only one working. Mm-hmm. So that was supposed to be our little nest egg to get through until I started working as a nurse. But our rent was going to go up. She wanted to sell the property, our landlord. So we were going to be putting out so much more money that we just said, you know what? Let me just reach out to this guy, Dave Sidoni. And I'm like, my email's going to go in a black hole and it's never going to, get anywhere. And you were so quick to respond to me. And I ran out to my husband's office and I'm like, he responded to me. This is real. We're open to talking about it. Our medical debt was around $12,000. We actually ended up saving around $25,000, I think. So we did have a good nest egg after we paid off the debt from that 18 months of working Dave Ramsey's plan. But when I went into it for the house, they didn't even want to hear about me being in school or potential jobs or anything. They're like, Sean's income is good. And whatever you make, this was the best part. They're like, when you start working and you have a dual income because the rates were higher, they're like, my mortgage broker was like, give it 2 years. They're going to come down and then you're going to refinance with a dual income. You're going to have a lower rate and it's actually going to work in your benefit. So that's why they based it solely on his, so that, yes, the payment was a little higher, but it was in our budget. It was in our budget that we didn't even realize until I listened to your podcast about how much can you really flex your budget.
If you listen to the episode, I actually teared up at the end of the interview because I was so generally thrilled for them with their happy ending. You can hear that plus a whole bunch more tips. That's episode 167. Now, if they had gotten the right guidance 2 years earlier, then they would have learned that right now we're in a different economy and you have to attack your debt differently. They would have learned that debt is not an evil monster that has to be completely and totally destroyed before you even think about taking the next steps in your life. If they'd worked the big three simultaneously, they would have created a rent replacement strategy and been able to buy a home earlier at a 25 or 35% discount. This story is a testimonial. It's an actual real life lesson of how to work with debt for your best outcome. Because buying a home in this new economy, it's a new housing affordability that we all have to figure out how to work. And because each of you are on a different square on that chutes and ladder board, I can't give you all the same one-size-fits-all step-by-step program for the best debt reduction to buy a home, because that means you're going to be getting generic information that's going to miss out on your own personal, unique possibilities. For Christina and Sean, if they'd had that proper guidance years earlier, they could have discovered a way to purchase a home with $12,000 in medical debt and no credit, and even done that purchase with only one income. In just a couple of months, instead of several years, they could have stopped renting way sooner, bought for much cheaper, and would be sitting on piles of equity today. But hey, again, no worries. They still had a happy ending that had us all in tears. And that's another lesson for you. In these 10 steps, for many of you out there, the biggest discovery will be maybe you've gotten misinformation, which has created these perceived negatives that you assume are stopping you from buying a home, especially and including the misinformation about debt. So like them, now that you heard this, don't let the fact that you could have done this earlier bum you out. Let it fuel your fire to proceed with new confidence now. The bogus myths about debt, they've created unjust fear. And that's everything: student debt, medical debt, talking about your income, your job, or your credit score, someone saying that all those things are holding you back and so you can't start. And I always like to say around here, ignorance is not a dirty word. When you're learning something, it just means you're learning it, and it's fine that you didn't know it before. I know it sounds odd, but embrace your ignorance. It's a chance for you to grow and learn. And when it comes to debt, do not let your current ignorance about how debt works when you're buying a home be the thing that stops you from becoming enlightened instead of afraid. While many financial gurus out there preach complete debt elimination before you even think about buying a home, that approach is supremely old school and needs serious updating. In our current economic climate with high rents and inflation, understanding the different types of debt, that's crucial for home ownership. We live in a capitalistic culture, but most of us out there, we really don't understand capital. Capital, that's your tool to overcome debt. And I bet that 95% of you out there listening to this podcast right now, that you have some level of debt. And the good news is it's not going to stop you from buying a home when you approach it the right way. Right now, more than ever, with the high rents that you're paying, it's crucial that you understand the difference between good debt, bad debt, and workable debt. So bad debt, that's like rent payments, debt that disappears with no return. Good debt, that's like mortgages that build equity, things that go into an appreciating asset. And finally, workable debt. That's the third one. That's your revolving and installment debt that you can manage. And if this all sounds foreign to you, don't worry about it. You're actually a few steps ahead, because the key concept is looking at home ownership like a rent replacement strategy and understanding that math where you're reallocating your largest monthly expense, your rent, into an appreciating asset. Here's how it breaks down. Instead of paying rent, that's bad debt, you can direct that money into mortgage payment, that's good debt, that builds your equity. And this strategy works even if you have some existing workable debt. So understanding those three types of debt in this modern way, perhaps the only way most of us can buy a home in the 21st century. You've got inflation, wage gaps, government manipulated money, and of course, the high rent economy. Your rent payment, it's a negative on your balance sheet. It disappears. Bad debt. Your house payment and your home loan, they're good debt because you're paying yourself into that appreciating asset, fully utilizing what used to be that large monthly payment that went into the bad debt category. So that's how looking at debt works into the rent replacement strategy from the playbook episode 388. So that's the bad debt and the good debt of a rent versus a mortgage. Let's look at revolving and installment debt as your workable debt. Like Christina and Sean, I'm absolutely positive that most of you out there, when you look at the math, it's going to show you that once you fully comprehend how to manage and use all three types of debt, once you put that into your own mathematical equation, you're going to see a faster path to financial independence through home ownership. Consider this. After 5 years of renting, you might walk away with what? Maybe a $2,000 security deposit. But after 5 years of home ownership, you have options. Equity you can use any way you want to for travel, career changes, or other life goals. And if after 5 years of home ownership, you're still living paycheck to paycheck, you will have still built wealth through the equity in your home. A home is a forced savings account. So taking it on with some debt isn't a bad thing. And I know jumping into planning to buy a home can be overwhelming. And so many people opt to just tackle, and I completely understand, jumping into buying a home can be overwhelming. And when people hear about the big three, they're like, whoa, I just got to do these one at a time. And I know that some of you do that because perhaps when you hear the one at a time advice, it seems like it's more digestible and easier to handle, but it can actually hurt your home buying power. I'm very aware of all the financial gurus out there that say differently, but I'm going to ask you this. In today's world, are the people that are giving this advice really understanding what's going on right now? Or are they giving 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old advice? And how many of them are giving you success stories from first-time home buyers that they have helped recently? You're going to need a custom, personalized new plan for a new economy instead of those old one-size-fits-all solutions so that those people can sell their books or their workshops or their programs. Here at the end of 2025 and 2026, let's change the focus from thinking that this is impossible to discover what you need to do to make it possible. Let's investigate the present-day solutions so you can ensure a more stable future. Your present-day debt is not a hindrance, and it shouldn't stop you from reaching out to a pro and starting your plan. And in fact, it should encourage you even more to get a guide to help reveal all the possibilities to you. I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen when you're trying to figure out if you can buy a home with some of your debt? I mean, the worst thing that happens is you discover that all your fears were right and your debt is too high. And now you need to reduce it first before you save up and buy a home. Cool. You already think that. So why not talk to a unicorn team? Because they might have different answers for you when you've got caring guidance and action steps to speed up your timeline based on your personal criteria. And I'm telling you, for a lot of you out there, your fears are going to be incorrect and you are a lot closer than you think. Here's some more tips that come from another success story. This is Dr. Kendall. She's got a PhD, psychology. This is what she learned trying to handle her debt and her savings.
Yeah. So I think the biggest thing that really hit me was that I was trying to do somebody else's job. I was trying to figure out all of this information by myself using all of those online calculators, Googling article after article, listening to podcasts. And at the end of the day, one of the simplest moments was just reaching out to a lender, giving hypotheticals and actually getting some answers. So I felt pretty silly at the end, realizing how much time I had spent when I could have just asked somebody for some help.
Even a freaking PhD couldn't resist diving into the matrix of the internet to figure out the best way to try to do this all on her own, only to discover that she could have avoided lots of stress and headaches by hiring the right team willing to help her with the planning so she could discover all her options. It's a great testimonial not to do this on your own. Also, not to go to Dave Ramsey or other crusty old dudes who are spewing garbage to you. And by the way, they're charging you for their outdated advice. So when it comes to debt, you've got to do that while you're also saving for your down payment. That's a little tricky, and that means it takes the 2 B words, not the one you're thinking of, you dirty, dirty mind. These 2 B words, budget and balance. First, the word that a lot of you really don't like, budget. The problem with the word budget is it always feels like you're focusing on depriving yourself. So I always tell buyers, think of it this way. A diet deprives you, but a lifestyle choice means that you get to do more things. It opens doors for you. In this case, you get to exit your tenant life and you get to gain full control of your living situation. Control is amazing. So with clear numbers, action steps, and goals set by you and your team, you can use budgeting so you can make conscious decisions instead of guessing. You can live guilt-free, and you can give yourself permission then to spend the money. I mean, you're saving it up, and you can put aside little predetermined mini rewards along the way. A budget is a permission slip for living. It's not depriving you today of the life that you want. And in fact, this year, I decided to get deep in budgeting, and I took weeks to figure out the best budgeting apps for aspiring homeowners. All the results are in episode 371. So you can use those apps to help you find the balance, figuring out what's manageable debt while also working on the savings that you're going to need. This is personal for each one of you, and it needs to be worked out on your own personal spreadsheet. Ooh, there it is. I said the S word. spreadsheet. And I know for some of you, hey, maybe that's your happy place. Maybe you just grinned. And for others of you, maybe you peed a little bit. I know spreadsheets can be scary for people. I get it. But you need some kind of a plan because this balancing act of paying off your debt while you're building up your savings, you got to figure it out. And with the right team, you can create your own custom formula and make, I don't care, a simple spreadsheet or crazy complex if that's your thing. Now, again, I broke it down real easy in that playbook episode 389. That's the last lease ever. That's going to help you create your own personalized solution to simultaneously work on all big three at the same time. The concept's simple, and you could shave years off wasted rent time that you could be using to grow your wealth. Do your own math right now. Think about this. How many years for you would it take to get rid of all your debt? If you took all your extra savings every month and put it towards your debt, how many years? Now calculate how many years would you pay at the same time in rent? Budget and balance, big part of the equation. Once you realize, hey, you know what? You can get approved for a home loan with some of that workable debt. That's when you get to work on both of those B words, the budget and balance, with your own personal target number selected with the advice of a professional who understands what you're going to need to buy the kind of home that you want. You'll find the custom formula to pay down debt and increase savings simultaneously to shave off the years of the old one-at-a-time game plan. And if your debt is big and it's going to be 98% of your game plan, here's a little psychological trick for yourself. Dr. Kendall would be so pleased. If you're swimming in debt, just automate $25 a month into a down payment savings account. Now, look, it's not going to break the bank or anything, and you're going to get in the habit of being able to see the big picture every month when you look at your bills. It can psychologically help you feel like, oh, okay, I get it. You're simultaneously paying down your debt while you're watching savings go up, even if it's small. And that's much more fulfilling than feeling like you can't start the saving process until you absolutely finish all the debt. Now I want to focus on another B word, how to be a badass. Dr. Kendall, tell them how it's done.
Your very first communication with me, you talked to me about something. This is a little deeper level. For if you guys are brand new starting, I think this is really important for you to hear. You have to do three things when you're getting ready. You have to work on your credit score, regardless. I'm not saying you can't buy if you have a low credit score, but you get better stuff, better rates, better loan programs. And then you have to work on your savings and your debt. That's the balancing act. You asked me about it. Tell us about your journey of trying to save for something while trying to reduce a debt at the same time.
Yeah. So I tried to figure out, are there certain numbers? I think you hear something like 30% debt to income, or, 30 seems to stick out to me. And so I think I had this idea that I needed to be at that realm, but also have a home. Down payment. I know one of the things that we tried to do was, you say this all the time, and this is probably a point I'll emphasize again later, but know your area. And so we had done a lot of research in where do we want to be and what is typical of those homes? What do they typically cost for an entry level that would work for our needs? My husband and I both work from home. We have a son. So we kind of had to try to figure out within the area what's a reasonable starting point. And from there, work our way backwards and think, okay, well, if you need the 3% down, if you need the 1 to 2% closing costs, what does that equate to if you need a $500,000 home? So that kind of gave us that savings goal that we were trying to then work our way backwards. Okay, if we want to do this in this many months, how much money do we need to be saving a month to kind of get us there? I felt a little silly later with some of the debt stuff. I think one, when talking with some of my unicorn team, I'm not saying this is great, but one of the things that was told to me is homes are just really expensive now. And so they recognize that not everybody can stay in some of that preferred debt to income ratio. And so they were saying that they'll go a lot higher than I think was traditionally accepted. So now knowing what I know, I think I maybe should have emphasized a little bit more that down payment savings goal first, just because they do kind of let you get away with a little bit more than that 30% for debt to income. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. That was just some of the information I had been given.
Absolutely perfect information. This is real deep for those of you who are really into it. What she's talking about is typically you're going to hear a whole lot of generalizations. And you're right, Kendall, it's 30%. The DTI, you have a front end and a back end, all these real estate terms. But basically with an FHA, and this is the math I've been trying to explain to people, with an FHA and sometimes even with a conventional, you can get up to 40 to 48% DTI. Now, the articles all say people paying half their money to pay their rent and how bad that is and how that's ruining our economy. Understood. But if we can't beat the man, then you figure out, well, if I'm going to be spending 40% for my rent anyway, what do I need to save? 3% down, 5% down, plus 1 to 3% for closing costs. And then you go and do that at a high, what we call DTI, debt to income ratio, 40%. You still can get a loan, but now you're paying yourself instead of your landlord.
Mm-hmm.
So what did you run into with your debts? Were you looking at manageable monthly payments, but large gross? I say that because that's usually student loans.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we had student loans. There was also things like some car loans. There was some credit cards that, when you're in a grad program that pays you pennies, if something breaks on your car, it's going on a credit card. That's just survival in that time period. So there was some credits, that were credit lines utilization that was higher than, would be ideal. So we were working with like a few different types of debt. And we were kind of trying to do a little bit of that snowball method where you're trying to pay extra towards one and then roll it into another. One of the things that had hung me up a little was how it was impacting my credit score. So that idea of if you look at your credit score and it breaks down all the different factors that are negatively or positively impacting it, for mine, the thing that was kind of a ding against it was that credit utilization was a little too high. I think they want 30% as well, if I remember correctly, in order to kind of have it in that green. And correct me if I'm wrong there. But
no, you're right. One of the hardest things about the snowball effect, because I believe in the snowball effect, but is the immediate credit scores don't jump right away. Because if you have 3 cards that are all at 70% usage and you're just knocking one down as opposed to knocking them all down, you can go from 70% to 60%. And then if you get them all below 50%, your credit score will go up. When in reality, there's a better way to, and that's where you have to understand your timing. There's a better way to pay them off long term. If you snowball one down, your utilization still kind of stinks because you got 2 at 70%. But then you're going to be able to roll into a higher payment and get them down quicker.
Yeah.
So
I will say, I want to say it was on one of your episodes. So if I am misquoting you, cut me off, stop me. As we were getting a little bit closer, I was thinking, gosh, I don't know how else to do this. I can't throw any extra money at the debt. I'm still trying to get up to the down payment that I need. And there was an episode that I think talked about ask for a credit line increase. Am I getting that right? Okay. Yep. And it was shockingly simple. I mean, of course it is, right? They want you to owe them more money. So I just logged into my credit cards and I said, hey, can I have a credit line increase? And they said, confirmed right away. Here you go. And all of a sudden my credit score boosted right away because I didn't pay down more, but it looked like I wasn't using as much of my credit anymore, which is
your credit usage jumps up.
Well, and one thing that really hit us when we were renting was as you watch people own their homes and you realize every year that you don't own, their stuff's locked in and yours isn't. And I don't mean to say that yours never changes, right? When you own a home, your taxes can increase. You might have these random years where you have very expensive repairs that are needed. But what we saw was we have family members who have been locked into their mortgages who now have $1,400 mortgages. I think I have a family member with an $800 mortgage. Our friends got locked in a mortgage where then our rent every year going up $300, $400. And so what we watched is as they had sort of this stability and expectation of their budget, ours changed every year. And so when you think about that, even just in a year or two, what a difference that makes, that was for us realizing, gosh, I mean, the sooner you get in, the better you can lock in some of that.
So there it is. Listen to the doctor. Debt is relative, and you have to use good debt, bad debt, and workable debt to create your own strategy. Here's a cool trick. Did you know that before you actually pay down debt, your team can use credit score simulators that will show you exactly what your credit score does, how it will improve when you pay certain amounts of debt down? Different results for every payoff, depending on what you plug into the simulator. That's just one way to show you, the big 3, they're all connected. And there's another bonus tip. What to do when you get what I like to call a windfall chunk of money. You get some big holiday bonus or a tax refund or a sudden influx of cash. The best thing that you can do, which to anyone not trying to buy a home is going to sound totally illogical, is to call your lender and run what to do with the money. It's true, because once you spend it, you can't get it back. So here's an example. And spoiler alert on this example, of course, this is not going to be exactly for you. The only right answer for what to do with a chunk like that is your answer, depending on your own personal situation. So that's why I recommend you talk to a pro, because they've seen this happen 100 other times before. Here's the example. Okay, let's say you've got $3,000 in credit card debt, and you're also $5,000 short of the savings that you need for your down payment and your closing costs. Now, suddenly, boom, you got a $5,000 bonus. Lots of times people are going to give you the advice, oh my gosh, pay off all that debt, because that's going to boost your credit score and get you a better loan rate. And then you can put the other $2,000 left over into the savings, and now you're super close. Well, here's where the options come in. What if you're already approved for a home loan and it's at a slightly higher rate because you've got to carry that $3,000 a month debt? But now this is where the balancing act happens. I mean, what if you put the whole $5,000 into your savings account, kept the $3,000 debt, because now you have enough to go home shopping tomorrow at a slightly higher rate? Is that the right thing to do? Well, the correct answer is it depends. It always depends, because it depends on your own personal situation. Maybe buying as soon as you can means that you can put an offer on the dream home that you saw last week, but you gave up on because you didn't have enough for your down payment. Or maybe for you, the timing of a quicker purchase saves you big money in rent. Maybe you got a big rent hike coming up. Or is the $3,000 in debt that you've got remaining, is that above 50% on your credit card? Or is it down at 25% and something manageable? Have you used a simulator to see what happens if you pay down part of the $3,000 debt and put the rest into savings? How long is it going to take for you to save up another $3,000 if you put that all in debt? See, the possibilities are endless. You see, the possibilities are endless, but only if you've done the prep work ahead of time. First, you need to work with a unicorn realtor to help you find a price point that works for your goals, all your goals. And then when you get to work on the big three, your unicorn lender is going to be looking at everything, running the numbers and options as your credit score, your debt, and your savings are all improving. All right, moving on. We already learned about revolving debt versus installment debt in step 2. So now let's get you educated on another element of understanding how debt works: gross debt versus monthly debt. Gross debt is your total amount of your debt, and that creates massive amounts of uncertainty and fear, especially if you've got those huge student loan debts. So listen close and let this soak into your unnecessarily fragile psyche. Your total debt is of no concern to me or the mortgage broker or the bank that's going to approve you for a home loan. So hear me in your ear holes. Total debt means squadoosh. You can have $200,000 in student debt plus $20,000 in credit card debt and owe $25,000 on a car. And when you apply for a home mortgage, ain't no one looking at that total number. Monthly, that's all that matters. And I hope that makes you feel less tense and afraid. So let's use this example and use my best friend, math, to explain how this works. Say you make $8,000 a month. All right, you got that student loan, $200,000. But if you have an income-driven repayment plan, your payment is $250 or $500 a month, even for $200,000. And a lot of you out there have got that. So let's say $500 a month. We'll go high. All right. And then you got $20,000 in credit card debt. That costs you $500 a month. And your $25,000 left on your car payment, you refinanced and it's down to $350 a month. The bank looks at just those monthly numbers, those monthly expenses out. 500 student loans, 500 for credit cards, $350 to car payment. Your total debt, $1,350. Now you make $8,000 a month, and $1,350, that's only 17% of your $8,000 that you make. So to qualify for a mortgage, with some loans, you can go up to 45% in your total monthly debt numbers. So what that includes is the new mortgage payment plus your current monthly debt payments. And yours are only at 17%, which leaves you another 31% left for a mortgage payment. And 31% of an $8,000 income each month, that's $2,480. In today's rates, that could buy you about a $400,000 home. And that is how they calculate your loan approval. Nobody cares that you've got a whopping debt total of $245,000. This is how they calculate what we call your debt to income ratio. It's called your DTI. That's how they determine what home loan amount you're approved for from the monthly numbers. So stop worrying about your gross debt. It's all about monthly. Now let's hear what the doctor found out when she put in tons of hard work on her own, stressed over her big gross debt and her potential loan approval. It's actually kind of cool to hear what Dr. PhD discovered when she got a professional opinion from a unicorn. So let's go back to Dr. Kendall.
Tell me what it looked like for you, where you were trying to balance paying down your debt and build your down payment. You had a chunk of money every month, and what were you doing with it?
Yeah, so we try to stick to a budget. We do the whole Excel sheet where it's, you've got the month broken into two. I knew what bills were coming up. And so every time I was paid, I would just look at how much money do I typically need for this section of the month. Whatever was left over was sent into the savings account. But then I had pre-set up ahead of time just extra payments going towards the credit card so that I didn't have to remember to log in and make those extra payments. So I'd kind of decided ahead of time when I looked at how much debt do I have? I want to buy a home in a year and a half. Tried to figure out okay, I need to shave off, at least this much amount on the debt. And then using credit card calculators, tried to figure out what's the best way to do that, factoring in interest. So it was a little bit of math up front to try to figure that out. But then I kind of just set up those auto payments. So they were automatically pulled out. And then whatever was left over in the account just got sent straight to savings for the down payment. So.
Okay, so you hit me up at Thanksgiving. I'll cut to the ending for everybody. You closed on May 1st.
We did.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
What were the differences when the unicorn ended up getting you to a lender? Did that change your payment structure and what you were doing with the saving and the debt reduction? Did you find new options, different things that you weren't, or did you just go in and say, what can I do?
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of me working harder than I should have needed to ahead of time was, I think, solving some of that earlier. By the time I was meeting with my team, I had a lot of ducks already kind of in a row. So they didn't really have to add any corrections or any adjustments. One of the things that I felt so silly about later on was that I agonized over trying to figure out how much money am I making? How much debt do I have? What kind of down payment do I have? And just the agony over, will I even qualify for enough? And it felt so silly later. I just reached out to a lender. I had a friend that had a great experience with a lender. So I reached out to him ahead of time and just said, hey, here's my hypotheticals. This is what I make. This is what our debts are. What kind of house would we potentially qualify for? And he was able to give us a ballpark range. And I think that number, that confirmation made our timeline speed up so much. This fear went away. This reality of this is possible. Let's get this ball rolling, made it real. And that's when I kind of really started hitting the ground running with things.
Oh, I love me some Kendall. And you can hear the full episode with many more tips in episode 187. That'll be in the show notes. Reducing your debt the old way without understanding all your options could mean that you miss out on major opportunities. And right now, we've got another great story about getting the right education to understand how big gross debts, even giant student loan debt numbers, they are not the deterrent that a lot of people think they are. This is another doctor, a medical doctor, who was shocked to know what was possible once they finally realized that a pro support team could help them prepare a lot better than Google. Let's hear from John and Richard from episode 186, one of my favorite couples.
Debt is a team sport.
Okay, so now I was joking, obviously. Student loans. I mean, the headline for this podcast is John came to me and said, I have $300,000 in student loans. What can I do?
So we talked with Kathy, who was our lender. She was amazing. She kind of just went through, pulled our credit. That was kind of one of the first things too. It was like, oh gosh, should I let her pull my credit? And what's that going to do? And then I heard one of your podcasts like soon after that, and it was like, just do it. Let them pull your credit. You want to do it as early as possible. That way it doesn't affect your stuff later on. And you want to know everything on there as early as possible. So yeah, we said, let's go ahead. Let's pull the credit. Let's see what we got. And she kind of asked us what our, monthly minimums were on the stuff that was on my credit report. And we handed over all the documents and bank statements, 401k stuff, just everything, savings and stuff, so that we could get it all going. And I've done my own research, quote unquote. And so I thought I had a handle or knew going in, like, oh, okay, like this is what I can expect. And it just turned out to be not nearly enough compared to what she brought to the table. And, it's very hypocritical because me as a primary care doctor hate when patients come in with their WebMD Google search stuff. And so it's like I was doing the exact same thing. But she was wonderful, answered all my questions, corrected a lot of my misconceptions. And I thought, oh, a physician loan would be best for us because of my student loans. So I brought that up to her, and she showed us and ran the numbers. And it really kind of depended on what kind of house we wanted to get. And really, the interest rates were still better with an FHA loan or even the regular conventional as opposed to a physician mortgage for our situation, which was crazy to me. But she showed us the numbers. She showed us everything, very transparent. And so she was like, look, here you go. This is what, it's going to look like for you. And I was like, wow, okay. That just difference in rate made all the difference, even with or without PMI. And I was like, okay, that was, we were so scared of, oh, I don't want to pay PMI, so let's do a physician mortgage. But here we are.
Okay, wherever you are listening to this, go ahead and exercise your rewind capabilities. If you're watching this on the video, rewind it. Did you hear all that? Overprepared, waiting to get a credit pull, and the WebMD thing? I mean, they thought for sure that because of some research they did online, that $300,000 in student loan was going to be a killer. They thought they were going to have to put 20% down to avoid PMI, and they thought that their only option was to use the physician's loan that they read about online. Well, with the advice of a unicorn, they learned that even with an enormous amount of student loan debt, $300,000, they had better options that they couldn't find on Google because the personable variables were too numerous to try to shove it into that one-size-fits-all answers. And even the almighty Google couldn't come up with a correct path for them. With the right first-time homebuyer real estate support team imparting their knowledge and expertise, you can do this faster and easier than the internet tells you. Now, they ended up using an FHA loan well below 20% and got a better interest rate, and the $300,000 debt did not hold them back from buying. If you want to hear the whole story, it's episode 186. I'll have JT put that in the show notes for you, and that's filled with tons of great tips and tactics. So when it comes to debt, you don't know what you don't know, and that's fine, because this next tip, it's a reminder. So technically, you should already know this one. If you're having a hard time with a big amount of debt, remember the tip from, I believe it was the last episode, step 2, on credit card consolidation loans. Before you go to that big bailout, remember, a consolidation loan could delay your home buying by 3 to 5 years, so consult with a professional to learn all your options. All right, getting back to the right now. It's the end of 2025 as I record this, and some of you might be listening to this in 2026, and I'm guessing we're still going to be in the same kind of new economy with new tricks and new tips to navigate the home buying process best. And although paying off your debt completely, yeah, it sounds good. It's good philosophy. Doesn't take into account the crazy high monthly output of today's renter. One of the only ways to get ahead in this game is to beat the annual negatively changing formula of rents versus wages. Doing that with a rent replacement strategy, because you also get a fixed payment when you have a mortgage. And you can do that even while you're carrying some of this debt. Today's economy, it's not your parents or your grandparents. And if people are trying to give you the dinosaur tactics that they use to buy a home, you're going to be paying rent until you're collecting Social Security. And for the people who question this method, ask me how it's more beneficial. And I get it. A lot of people think, you know what? This sounds great, but I'm going to go with this guy who teaches safe first. I know it sounds better, but I got math. And I also have the fact that I'm not charging anyone for financial advice on home buying. I'm not asking you to give me money so that I can build an empire on the backs of the very people who I'm telling to make sure you save every single penny. Okay, got a little salty there at the end, but hey, everybody, that's debt. The middle child of the big three: credit score, debt, and savings. Work them all simultaneously. and work them for buying in today's world. Step 4 done. You're getting there. You rock. Keep going. Keep it up. Next, saving money to buy a home. You can do this.
Looking for more DIY education or your own personal step-by-step guidance through the home buying journey? Since 2019, How to Buy a Home has been the #1 resource for first-time home buyers. So visit howtobuyaHome.com to get started.